Good morning, St. Francis, and good morning, people of God. Today is Tuesday, September the 21st, 2021. It is the 25th week of the year. It is a Tuesday, but on this day, the 21st of September, it is also the feast of St. Matthew, the Apostle and Evangelist. Coming to you this morning from the back of the wetlands over here, and down the way from the Magnolia Circle, right behind me over there. And then you can see a little bit of the log cabin through the trees on that side. Today's feast of St. Matthew, again, this man who was a tax collector, who worked for the Roman Empire, who made his income, who made his salary by the extra money he was able to gouge or discourage from his brother and sister Jews after collecting the taxes that were due to the empire. Because of that, the man was hated, reviled, was somebody who nobody would associate with, was considered a traitor, was considered the worst of the worst, a terrible, awful sinner because of what he did to his brother and sister Jews. While he rose in comforts and luxuries, he basically left his kinspeople in poverty or worse. And so Matthew, the last person that anybody would ever think of to add to Jesus's band of 12, Jesus calls him. And it is scandalous because he is thought to be so much of a sinner, so much a person who has distanced himself from the love of God, from God's commands, from the things that God asks Judaism, the chosen people, to do. How could Jesus ever find something redeemable in him? But Jesus does. And so on this day, to wrestle with this kind of question of how somebody, of Matthew's character and of his attitudes and of his behaviors could ever be linked to Jesus, we are given special readings. We depart from the book of Ezra for today, and we go to Paul's letter to the Ephesians. And in that letter to the Ephesians, Paul describes what are the characteristics, what does it mean to live as a believer in this world to the church, to the people who are the church of Ephesus. And the guidelines for them, the markers, the characteristics for them are gentleness, meekness, patience with one another, bearing with one another. It is love, it is unity. All things, again, that look away from ourselves. All things that look away from ourselves and look at the lives of one another. They are the hallmarks of mercy, that great characteristic that Jesus talks about in the Sermon on the Plain. That is about understanding the hills and valleys that people trudge through and journey through in their lives, what makes them who they are, why they respond the way that they do, why they react the way that they do. To know each other through meekness, gentleness, patience, bearing with one another, doing it out of love and doing it for the sake of unity is why believers exist in the world. It's how believers act with each other, towards each other in this world, which should provide an example for others to want to follow and model their own lives after. Again, that kind of gentleness, meekness, patience, love, unity is what Jesus perhaps sees when he calls Matthew, which is what the gospel is about today, from the Gospel of Matthew, Matthew's own remembering of his own call by Jesus. And that call basically comes while he is at the counting table, again, scourging his brother and sister Jews, taking more money from them that is needed so that he can live a high and fancy lifestyle. Jesus comes to him and says, "Follow me." And Matthew immediately does, somehow, some way. It is scandalous to the scribes and Pharisees, and I cannot believe that Jesus would associate with somebody like himself, but Jesus' response is basically, I don't come for the well, I come for the sick, because the sick need my help. They need to understand themselves more fully. They need to understand who they and what they are. They need to understand their dignity. They need to reclaim all of that back. They need to come back home because they have lost their way. And that is what Jesus does with Matthew. Again, for us, this whole understanding sometimes still of who should receive sacraments and who shouldn't, who deserves to be a part of the church, who doesn't, who deserves to have any kind of role within the church and who doesn't, is generally our own agendas, our own call, our own anxieties and frustrations coming forth. To deprive people of the sacraments is wrong. To deprive people of what is the medicine that we need to be able to help us see ourselves in a new and different and glorious and wonderful light is wrong. To deprive anybody of those things is wrong. And that is not why sacraments do not exist, just so that only those who are devout, holy, and pious can just sit upon themselves and think that how wonderful, holy, and pious they are. Because in many ways, they may not be. They may not be in any way, shape, or form this sort of image that they create for themselves. God comes that we might know ourselves better. Christ comes that we might know ourselves better, so that we can rejoice in what God has created in each one of us. The sacraments become the means to tap into that understanding, to tap into that grace, to tap into that wonder. To deprive anyone of that is a terrible sin, is something that goes against God's commands, is something that goes against the gospel. It's something that deprives us and them of the unity, of the love, of the gentleness, of the bearing with one another, of the meekness and the patience that Paul says to be a member of the church requires us to be. May we always be able to open our hearts to who and what we are to one another, in the same way that Christ's heart was open to Matthew, and Matthew's heart was all of a sudden opened up to both Christ and to his brother and sister Jews in a way he might not have ever thought possible. That healing, that transformation, makes the world a wonderful place and shows God's reign coming forth in our midst. And may the Lord give you his peace.